everyone, and thanks for joining me for another great conversation. My next guest has been fighting the good fight for a very long time. He is the founder of Pride Productions Incorporated, and he is the executive producer at Unity Radio, which is a radio station here in my hometown of Worcester. He dedicated most of his life to basically empower young adults, specifically in the communications field, to give them opportunities that they would not normally receive. I introduce to you guys the very knowledgeable and humble Ernest Floyd. Stuff. So Ernie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I mean, it's rare where, you can reach out to somebody nowadays that you don't know at all and get a response that's hell yeah, let's do this. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it too for you reaching out and taking the time to do this because you're right. It's one of my pet peeves is basically if I extend something to try to contact someone, whether they're interested or not, at least say no.
Yeah, exactly. Seems basic, but nobody follows that rule.
Yeah, no one follows that. So I guess it's fortunate. In this case, we're at least talking, So
yeah, exactly.
So welcome.
Now, I'm really excited about this conversation because of what you're doing, not only for the community, but the community that I live in, which is Worcester. But before we delve into any of that, can you let the people know about you a little bit?
Yeah, I'm originally from Roxbury, Massachusetts. I arrived here about 1979, 1980-ish or so, and fortunate enough to earn a athletic scholarship at the College of the Holy Cross here in Worcester.
Oh, nice.
And I played 4 years there. And then at the same time, had a great education and developed valuable relationships that I still cherish today. I have a group text with a number of former ball players. And you can tell when it's the season because my phone is buzzing. 11 o'clock at night or 1 a.m. or 2 because they're all around the country, so it's pretty interesting and they're always commenting about the basketball. So yeah, I've been involved with that, and then after that I was fortunate enough to be drafted 5th round by the Milwaukee Bucks, tried out, and then that was a very brief stint, and then
awesome.
I was drafted 5th round and fortunate enough, and then they felt there was some interest there, and then I went to Europe and I came back home to Worcester. So with all that taking place in that time frame, and I really wanted to get involved with the community, and I had the community bug when I returned because of the fact that at the time Worcester was going through some changes with youth in the city and relationships, kind of similar like what's going on today. It just all cycles around, I guess, and continuing to this day. And so I was involved with a number of different nonprofit organizations involving, we'll say, quote unquote, the good kids.
Okay.
And other youth that were in the community, they wanted a voice too, and they weren't really making a lot of noise. They just wanted to have a voice and find themselves, and they weren't really welcomed in the nature of what they were trying to do. So I put my neck out on the line, and I'm a really youth advocate, and I was trying to help them. And this is about 1990, about this time, and I was working at a communications entity that was selling cable advertising at a local cable company here, USA, MTV, CNN, of that sort. And that was my professional career. And I started that, and I ended that about 14 years overall. I would say about 1999, 2000, I ended it. And that's when I really got hardcore into the community. But back in 1994, I incorporated as a nonprofit entity, and that's called Pride Productions. And my first effort was to create a half-an-hour TV show involving youth and community. And they hosted it, and I went around recording it and producing it. And we did it originally out of the Ionic Gap Boys and Girls Club. And I received my support from Shrewsbury Public Access out there at the time. And we had a good running stint. In combination of me working at the cable company, I had a chance to have it aired on Channel 3. So it was reaching not only Worcester, but all the 22 surrounding communities around Worcester. It was a really popular show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, that I would say during that stint, I evolved in not only producing the show, but then I ended up finding a location at the Ionic Gap Boys and Girls Club. And then soon afterwards would be the former Worcester Common Outlets, which was the mall. So I went from 400 square feet of space to 4,000, actually. One side dedicated to PCs, one dedicated to Macs. And I was just really threw myself into just empowering young people through communications in multimedia at the time. And then eventually the mall closed and we had to go with it. And we ended up getting property over at the Denholm building.
Mm-hmm.
This is about 2005 by this time. And then 2010, we were still fulfilling some of the agreements we had. I was teaching and offering GED programs, work employment training for our young people. And I was in partnership with UPS as well. And also the city of Worcester through the Workforce Central at the time, which is called Mass Hire. And then I'd say about 2010, I just said, okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I'm done, but I kept my nonprofit status. And after 2 years, I started back up 2012, 2013. And I said that maybe I'm not done. I want to try something else as far as continuing our efforts. And we had a strategic plan. I had a grassroots group of people that was with me, and radio became a factor. And then I would say about 2013, 14, we pursued it. We received our license in 2015, called LPFM, Low Power FM license. So we were internet based for 2 years. 2017, we went on the air for the first time at City Hall, covering one of the city elections. And then we were operating out of Becker College at that time. And then 2018, we moved downtown and near the rear of Mechanics Hall, where we operate there now. And then 2019, we changed our number for 102.9 to 97.9 FM right now. And we're streaming at WTY 979fm.org. We still continue offering the youth component as far as training. We call it the Alliance Media Group. So we have a number of interns coming from high school and college that come down and help produce the shows. And we have a variety of different shows there. So my main effort right now in the community and my contribution is to operate the radio station called Unity Radio. And that's where we are.
That's incredible. There's a ton to unpack there. First of all, you took me down memory lane when you were talking about places like, the fashion outlets, the Worcester Common outlets, and Ionic Boys and Girls Club. So I'm here glued in down memory lane. But there's one question that stuck out to me that I really would love to ask you, as somebody who went to the NBA, as somebody who is well-traveled, as somebody who obviously was, in business with big companies. You named some of the big television networks at the time. What makes an individual like that, like you said, stick their neck out for a cause that some people would say is often overlooked, which is the youth? Is that just like a personal project, or did it just hit you one day?
Oh, no. I think what happened was when I was in college, I had a pretty decent stint in college too, as being a well-known, popular athlete and playing basketball there as well. And then in some instances, there were a number of instances I was requested to go out and speak to people at different functions and speaking to the youth at that time too as well.
Okay.
It really started back when I was I would say between 1970 and 79. It was my unique childhood experience was I was experiencing people coming up to me and offering me all kinds of opportunities. I played on a very popular basketball team back then. They didn't have AAU, but it was a AAU type of framework, if you will. And it was a popular basketball team back then in the community, in the city. And I attended a very popular performance art school called the Elmer Lewis School of Fine Arts,
Okay.
And they just had its 50th anniversary. There's a flagship program called Black Nativity that I participated in many moons ago. And we was about to feature it here in Worcester this past winter, unfortunately, due to circumstances, worldwide, not only locally here as well.
Okay.
I was always provided opportunity to whether it was a scholarship to go to school or a job or perform after school. And I just was surrounded by people who just offered me opportunity after opportunity. And the difference between someone being successful in some instances and not is I took advantage of those opportunities, which led me to, free education, which led me to traveling the world, which led me into opened a lot of doors for me in communications and media. And I met good people and being associated with a lot of different youth agencies. And I felt as though that I was fortunate enough to experience that. And so I wanted other people to experience it as well. And through that, I said that I would create these avenues here in Worcester. And sometimes the doors weren't open for young people in the community to experience these things. and I couldn't figure out why. So I said, well, if they're not being opened by other individuals, I took it upon myself to say, well, I'll create it and open the doors and to see if they'll walk through. And I can say today, I have a number of students, of people that I've known over the years, over 20, 25 years I've been doing this, that they've close to 30 actually, that now are professionals in the medical field, the auto industry, the entertainment recording industry, and as well as the education as well. So I'm really proud to say that.
Yeah, actually, I believe the way we were connected was actually one of those great stories. So shout out to her for that. But that's incredible. So Ernie, was one of those individuals that I guess you would call what you said. Let's call him the bad kid, right? I was one of the bad kids. I actually never heard of the opportunities that you were presenting and stuff. How was it that you was going out at that time and actually trying to get people interested and basically changing their life? Was there a certain way to doing it, or?
Well, when you're changing people's lives and everyone's motivated by something that they've experienced or motivated by something that they have of interest. My interest was communications. And through that, I was always a fan of television. I was always a fan of video. And so I just, I learned it from being in the industry for selling cable advertising. And I would say my third year in, I mastered the sales of it, but I needed another piece to balance my life at the time because I was focusing on just work. And I finally figured it out. But the calling in the community at the time where people were just, young people especially, were looking for something. And at the time they were fighting, a certain population was fighting with the city of Worcester overall, and it was always in the paper. The Worcester Youth Center or some organization was fighting with the city establishment. I call it the establishment. And I was fortunate enough to be in the industry. And at the same time, I said, well, let me try and see if I can do something. So I duplicated a TV show that was on BET, and I called it Youth Unity. At the time, the show on BET was called Teen Summit, and I duplicated it. And I think it was a combination of, going back to your question, how I was able to do it. I think my basketball or my athletic competitiveness piece of that came in. Whereas, if someone else failed on it, they weren't going to be able to do it. I'm going to say, I try to prove to myself, okay, you couldn't do it, but I'm going to prove to myself that I can do it. Right. So I had a little bit of that behind it as far as my efforts go on trying to create a project. And I felt pretty comfortable in doing that. And even though I received a lot of backlash at the time too as well. It got so bad one time that when I tried to create one of the locations over off of Stafford and James Street, it's in the paper too as well, they try to change the zoning laws. That's how bad of me to operate. So, think about it. You're trying to go into we'll say a strip mall, and it's zoned for retail, and you're trying to put a business in this retail strip mall, which is zoned for, and all of a sudden the city council is coming out because they don't like what you're trying to put in there. They're trying to change zoning laws so that it would reflect manufacturing, we'll say.
Sure. And why would they not? I mean, in your opinion, of course, because there could be a million reasons, but why would they not want that to happen here in their city? Well, quote unquote, their city.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be upfront. And this is what I said this before too, is because of the nature of what I was doing, it was basically a facility that was going to offer communications there. Yep. And I really wanted to highlight the TV show because the TV show would have been a chance to allow people to see what's going on inside a facility, which would have been different than other people operating their youth centers because you won't know the effects until you actually walk through the doors. Okay. Right. So in my case, I was going to do a combination of both. But then when they saw me, they thought I was a billboard to invite every nationality, brown and black, into their community. And they just was like, Ernie, we saw you play basketball at Holy Cross and you were great and we had season tickets, but the initiative that you're trying to do for young people in this community, we just don't want it in our neighborhoods without even hesitation. They shared it, and I said, okay, I can respect that. And, and that's just the fear, and the 6'9" guy, African-American person such as myself, walking around talking about empowering youth. I guess they weren't used to that, like, where's this guy coming from?
Yeah, it seems threatening. Now this is the first time I've heard somebody actually with a cause talk about these things because, now with all the polarization that's going on nowadays, there's a lot of people that would say that minorities are basically just victim blaming themselves, right? and you're telling me that this is actually a thing. There's actually people that don't want to see, certain individuals get to a certain spot. Is that correct?
Of course. I experienced it myself. And I kind of kid half-heartedly by saying, I've been there when they were throwing rocks and tomatoes at me,
Yeah.
As a metaphorical way, whereas it's like, they didn't care who I was. They liked me as a person. They liked me as what I contributed to them. What they felt was safe they went to the games that I played at and competed at in the college I attended. And when I graduated, I was in a community, they found it admirable, but they just didn't wish to have, they would say at that time, that element in our neighborhoods. They were in fear, or one political person would say, why don't you just put that under the church that's in that neighborhood? Or why don't you just go under father such and such or something? I said, no. I said, I want to create something where I can be in control, and I understand where these kids are coming from, the sources that they need. Why can't we just do this? What's the big deal?
Exactly.
The person said to me at that time, in a very lead position, would say, something, okay, if that's what you're going to do, you go ahead and do that. But I'm going to make sure it doesn't succeed. I'm going to make sure it fails. This is a city official telling me this,
Oh, wow.
Out of city. I'll go as far as that at that time. And it's in the paper too. So we had them. And then at that time, the city had these walkthroughs, in the perspective of different neighborhoods. In this particular neighborhood, Saffron and James Street, they had a walkthrough. And so the walkthrough meaning the fact that the city officials, like the mayor, city council,
yep,
chief of police, fire chief, the residents there in the area. And if they had any concern, they would walk through, a certain area and have discussions. Well, obviously, I was the number one target at that time. So they would come into the facility.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that I called my constituents. I called my friends because I knew that by walking in this facility and being there, and I knew the time and what they were going to do. And my friends showed up too. So it was crazy where I'm standing in this practically abandoned building, and I have on one side opposition, and one side I have people that was for it, and
yeah,
I stepped back, and they was just the city manager at the mayor at the time was standing there, and they said, okay, everyone that's for it, you stand over here. Everyone that's against it, you stand over there. And they went to town saying why it's important for kids to have a place. Another group was saying what their fears were. And I'm standing in the middle like, wow, this is serious stuff,
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of meetings that came out. Whereas one time over Our Lady's parish over there by Main Street.
Yep.
And before I walked in, the police officer stuck his hand out and pushed me in my chest, respectfully, and said, there's a lot of stuff going on in this meeting, but you're the number one target, he says, that you're talking about.
Oh, boy.
I was like, really? He says, yeah. So when I walked in, it was almost like a congressional political hearing at the White House or something like that. They had a long table in this auditorium, you name it. School superintendent was there. They had a state rep there, the fire chief, the police chief, the principal. Oh,
wow.
Neighborhood leaders, and out in the audience was all the residents. And anything short of that meeting was sticks and chains.
Yeah, wow.
To do what they were talking about, and they were concerned about me opening up a youth center in that facility, and they came out and they were scared, in reference to what I was proposing. I'm saying, you're having these problems in your neighborhood. People are defacing property. People are vandalizing property, which happens to be the same people. The parents that were complaining about me happened to be their kids defacing property and creating vandalism. All I said was, I'm trying to create a facility for them to attend so that they can keep them busy. If they're busy with me 2 or 3 or 4 hours, that means there's 2 or 3 or 4 hours they're not out in the streets wreaking havoc.
Exactly. Yeah, they're distracted.
They didn't get that, and so
yeah.
And that was my experience, and it's in the paper. If you look it up and document it and look back go to the library, it's all there, and you're like, wow, it was a crazy time. And
now the weirdest thing to me is that, and it shouldn't matter anyways, but say, you just came right off the street and you were a hustler that basically, started doing youth events and stuff. I would see a better argument in them saying, hey, you just don't have the credentials to do this, but you had the credentials and then some. You actually, like you said, played in Holy Cross. You were in higher network, tiered people, and they still had a problem with what you were doing. That's insane.
They did not care. And it was just, and don't forget too, me being an individual and a few grassroots people, and it was a voting season at that time. I'm only one person, and these political people were just using me as a platform for them to get votes too, as well. And I wasn't hip to the game at the time. As I look back, I'm
Sure.
looking at this, I'm like, I think I got a lot of people voted, at that time.
Yeah.
And it was sad because I try to make it as simple as possible, and they wanted to complicate it even more and complicate it even more. And they just wasn't used to a person of color walking in their community. This is what happened one time. I set up, and a friend. I had a friend, and they were professionally and personally, I would consider my friend, and they were one of my clients, and they offered me the building to offer it. They thought it was a great idea. So
Okay.
I put it in the paper. I called the paper, and I called the city of Worcester, and I staged a cleaning, if you will. And some kids came over, and they started throwing rubbish into the garbage truck, city garbage truck at the time. A telegram came, took pictures, and it did a story. He thought that was admirable. Kids cleaning out a facility to create a home for themselves so that they can have a safe haven, right?
Sure.
Hit the paper. Oh my goodness. That was the worst thing that could have ever happened. It was like so many people in the neighborhood came out against it, and that was how they were alerted, almost in a sense, kind of like alerting a butters.
Yeah.
Trying to put something in someone's property in the target area. And they came out and they just like, what's going on? And they banded together in that community like nobody's business. And that's where the meetings came up at the church, as I said earlier. And they came out and they were marching in the streets too. In some instances, they staged stuff and they had flyers up because at the time, internet wasn't as it is today. They put flyers up on the poles and stuff, and they had marches and stuff to prevent me from opening up at the facility.
Now, did they lean on any big part of the argument? Like, were they saying, hey, we feel, you're taking advantage of our children? Like, was there something that they leaned on?
Oh, yeah. They leaned on the fact that, and it was kind of flattering at the same time, but at the same time, I think they gave me way too much credit. They thought I was a billboard. And I said this in a paper, I think one time too. I think they think I was a billboard, that I was going to be an alley for everybody in the city of color, including Great Brook Valley, that they were going to march down all the way from Great Brook Valley, down Park Ave, down Main Street, that I was going to capture every brown and black child in the city of Worcester was going to come to that facility. That was their main concern, was black and brown children coming to their facility.
I grew up in the Valley, so I wish you would have came by and
yeah. And that's all the kids wanted. But they had no one advocating for them in the sense that that someone would fight for them in that manner, And it was kind of like you had a lot of different scenarios. You had low income versus high income. You had power versus the powerless. You had people who were privileged with the non-privileged. There was so many different barriers and so many different cliches that was going on at the same time, all mixed into one.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy at that time, just crazy.
Now, you sound like you were outnumbered. Did you, was there a lot of people backing your cause? Was there anybody backing your cause? Were you on your own in this venture?
I was kind of like on my own. I had a couple of grassroots people, and I knew some of the political constituents, like that. But, shoot, man, I was only one vote, and the other people, they banned again. Their votes for that city councilor that wanted to have me not enter into that property in that location, and to the point where they went down and tried to change the zoning laws. That's pretty strong,
That's insane.
Entitled to go and operate a business in a retail establishment, a zone for retail, and then you don't like my spaghetti and meatballs, if you will, and so now you're going to change it to be a manufacturing zone where I can only open up in a manufacturing facility. That's how bad it was.
That's outrageous. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, if it's the same strip that I'm thinking of, didn't they have a porno video store there, like a Gallo Video or something like that?
You know something? I was gonna mention that, and that's so funny that you should say that, because you know something, in the same location, you're right. And that was a client that was not my client, but they were advertising as a company at the time on cable TV. And you're right. The video store went in. They had no problem. There's a liquor store directly across the street at the busy corner. No problem. I'm trying to put in a positive, safe haven environment for young people. And that neighborhood at the time was noticed for vandalism, noticed for defacing and graffiti and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to provide a location for them to give those kids something to do, basically.
Yeah.
And they weren't having it. But you're right. There was a video store that actually went into the same location. It took the location, and there was a liquor store across the street. They had no problem with those two entities in its place. But long as Ernie Floyd was not bringing in black and brown children in their neighborhood and in that facility congregating, stupid stuff like, well, the music's going to be so loud in here because at the time the building had a hole outside, and you it was kind of like web framing in a building, and it had maybe a little patch, hole that you couldn't even see through the building, but it had a hole. And someone said the music's going to be so loud that's going to bleed through that hole, and it's going to consume the whole community. That I'm like, wow, I don't know what type of sound system that I was going to have in there. Do that, it was just that's the ignorance and outrageousness that they had and the fear that they had at the time,
But yeah, now that you say ignorance, that was going to be my next question: is how much of this do you think it was just them being ignorant to the struggle of a minority, quote unquote, or is it that it was systemic and they actually had an intention?
It was systemic, and once again, it's the haves versus the have-nots, which is sad. The haves versus the have-nots. There's a privileged few people in the city, or privileged large group of people, and if they have the authority and if they have the ear to the politicians that make the rules and regulations and the procedures and the laws and everything else, and and they have their ear and their vote, and it goes back to us, and I'm going to say it up front that we have a history of saying, okay, we're not going to vote due to whatever, voting, and it's not going to work, or it doesn't count. But something, vote does count. And if you get together and you find someone that's going to be a spokesperson for you or that community, and you believe in their values and they're a person of color, you got to vote that person in. So at least get an ally at the table. If not, they're going to find somebody else to defend them, and they're going to vote for them, put their money up, go down to the campaign, and go down to the voting booths, and they're going to vote that person in. And we're outside, looking in again, trying to figure out why things get done for other people and not for us, because we don't put our friends or our constituents or whomever into elected positions. And that's where the change is. But yet we're taught and we're telling ourselves, well, we're not going to vote because it's not going to count.
And that's powerful coming from you with the story that you just gave us, because you've actually lived through this, right? Like there's a lot of people, especially now with social media being the podium for everything, there's a lot of people that just read a few books and then try to spew off at the mouth this stuff. Injustice and all this, you actually lived this.
Well, it's funny you should say that. And I'm going to tell you this as well, is because this past season, we experienced a lot of rallies, we'll call it, down in Worcester and the surrounding towns. And the weather's nice and people putting their fists in the air and they're walking with their children and their family members and friends. And I get it, and that's great. And they're speaking eloquently and they have some force behind it, and they have a strong message and people are cheering. And it's multicultural, it's diverse, and that people are supporting the cause, which is awesome, But I'm impressed. I will be more impressed when the polls open up and the political season comes around. And I want to see that same effort being applied to your feet marching to the polls. If not, all that's for naught. That was only 10, 15 minutes of fame, or destroying people's property, whatever the case may be, in addition to that. And that's all you got out of it. You get your speaking engagement, you videotaped it, you can put it in your file, stir it away, and say that's what you did.
Yeah.
So that's what the cause was. But until the weather gets a little bit cold, and because it's usually colder right around the time when you're voting. Yep. And so if you can get out of bed, go down there and vote and march down there and get somebody into office, I'll be impressed. But other than that, this other stuff that's been going on, I'm not impressed.
Yeah, but the problem is that nowadays it's a clout chase thing, right? Now it's like, hey, I will go down there and walk with, other people and put my fist up so that I could post it on my Instagram.
Yeah, and say and they sometimes some instances you get some institutions that say, okay, I can't do anything, but I'll give you money. Here's a couple of bucks, and I feel good that I can give you money to support you, and that's okay, Or okay, I can march with you, but something. The thing about it is find a candidate in the community and advocate for that candidate that may be representative of your ideals and your goals, or ideal person that could. Politically fight for you, and that's where it happens is in the office. It makes no sense going out there saying all these different things and being on the news. Whereas politically, you can take that same just imagine if they took all those rallies that they did this past season,
Yeah.
they took those numbers and made them eligible voters, and if they're all, some were eligible voters, you took that. You know how many people of color would be in office in the city of Worcester alone?
Right. You would think.
At least 2 or 3 in school committee as well. But they don't take that mentality, saying, "Well, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't count." And it's like, but yet you're going to go out and march and fight against the establishment. Those people are not in there because they put themselves there. They're in there because people voted them in. You can vote them out just as much as you vote a person in, and for some reason they don't get it, man.
Yeah, well, it's either they don't get it, or a lot of the times they just build a huge dependency on these people, right? And I think one of the biggest things that human beings hate to do is to admit they're wrong, right? So they'll vote somebody in when they, in a different time in their life when they felt a different way, and then they lean into that person so much that they wouldn't just say, "Hey, I got to get this guy out of here. I was wrong." They'd rather just say, "No, I'm going to keep being wrong, but you won't know about it." That type of feeling. Yeah,
but the thing about it is you're right. Some people have to start admitting and being real, because now it's to the point where, back in the day when they fought and they really sacrificed.
They sure did.
There were water holes, and they were being bit by dogs, and they were being pushed and shot and killed and everything else. And today it's like it's the same struggle and the same fight, but it's a different type of nuance, different type of fight in some instances. It's so divided. You don't know which person to follow, what lane to follow now, which path. It's almost kind of like being at Kelly Square. Okay, which lane do you take? You're going to take the Madison Street? Are you going to take Harvard? You're going to take Green? Which one is he going to go? Now it's like, it's hard. And if you do speak out against somebody, then sometimes, or the cause, then sometimes you get backlash from your own people.
Absolutely, yeah. They'll start throwing out labels. Absolutely.
Oh, they start throwing out labels. Or if you decide to go ahead and do something, and make an initiative, and it might be the good thing to do, but then in their eyes, since you didn't include them in it, then it's kind of like, well, you're doing it the wrong way because I expected you to do it this way versus that way. But then again, they don't put themselves out there, but yet they'll criticize the person who's making the effort. I experienced that too as well, even recently.
Absolutely,
it's crazy. It's like, well, I'm not going to fight for anything. I'm going to just sit on the side, and then there's other people just fight. But then after a while, there's no foundation. In the end, Jose, no foundation. What are you fighting for? And then it gets political, and then other people coming for their own agenda. Then they're starting to destroy property, and that's not what it's about. Destroying property and going crazy. And before you know it, what do you really have? It's a mess.
And then I feel that the only people that actually win in these situations are the very politicians that we're, supposedly fighting for, because if you, like you said, in the past, there was real fighting. It was, groups of people, crowds of people. If you were to realize that we are much stronger as a group of people than we are fighting with each other and divided, then you would understand that this is just a show. And in order for them to continue the show, and what I mean by them are the politicians and the leaders that are getting away with this stuff, if you want the show to end, you need to take the audience away. We continue to give them this audience. We continue to free campaign for, arguing with our family members, especially during this political season. And my favorite line during this whole weird year and season, political season, that I tell my wife is, human beings are just strange individuals. Human beings are just very, very weird on how we think things, and how we, like you said, sometimes we need to take action and we don't take action. We psych ourselves out. Very strange.
It is strange, and it's sad because there's a lot of instances. We have a lot of power. The Black and brown people have a lot of power, but are they willing to really go out and really, exercise that power, and really engage themselves? But not only just do that, but do it the right way, strategically. I remember a couple of years ago when they were marching on Main Street, I was working, I could tell you, 2013, 14, I think it was, Clark University students walked out, and they took over Main Street. About 300 students just started walking down Main Street, stopping traffic.
I remember that. Yep.
And then Boston was marching, and then around the country, people were marching. It's kind of similar to what's going on today. And so I got out there, and I was like, "What's going on?" Oh, we were marching because they were protesting, and I said, "Okay, all right then." I said, "Well, what's going to happen after that?" They didn't have a plan. I said, "It'd be nice if you came into the facility I was working at, and then had a plan and refed you what you're fighting for and say, okay, what's plan B? Plan B is we want to put somebody in office. Plan B is how do we do that? We want to have a registration rally and get people registered, and then with some type of conscious educational, strategic way to take those 300 Clark students, get them into being official voters, and then finding someone to vote for. All they did was walk down the street, disrupt traffic. Police came out. They did their wall, had their canes in their hands. They sat down on the street, and that's all it was. And then eventually they ended up walking down Main Street, opening up Main Street, and walking in front of City Hall, yelling and screaming and shouting. But in the end, is there a political candidate in position? No. Is there? How are you supposed to change this down? If you're going to fight the establishment, you can't fight it by yelling at it. You can't fight it by throwing rocks at it. You got to get in there. And how do you get in there? You got to vote somebody in. You can vote somebody in, to get in there. But don't forget what I said earlier. The mentality is, well, I'm not going to vote because I vote don't count. So it's kind of like an oxymoron. I just don't get it,
Yeah, very strange. So I'm glad you said that, Black and brown people have a lot of power. One of the ways that I, talk to people about it is through the culture, through hip hop culture. So I grew up in Great Brook Valley. So I was definitely, around hip hop culture. And to me, hip hop culture is everything. But the difference from when I was a kid to what it is now is that, the culture makes everything cool. The culture makes everything pop. If you look across the board from media to music to I just saw Travis Scott selling cheeseburgers from McDonald's. And that's one of the ways that I've noticed over time that, yes, Black and brown people have, if not more power than they think, than the majority of the power, and they need to realize it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's how it's used. It's kind of interesting. You say that he's doing McDonald's, but then again, back in the day, hip hop in the early, I would say, we'll say this, the early 80s, we'll say, late 70s, early 80s, hip hop, you wouldn't dare cross doing mainstream anything.
You're right. Yep.
It was either in the hood or in that neighborhood, in that community, and that was it. And so if you were like an MC Hammer and all of a sudden you started dancing, before you know it, you're getting the MC Hammer doll and you're doing MC Hammer commercials, they were like, whoa, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What's going on here? That's not what we're about. You're on the other side now. You're supposed to be in the hood and go down with us in the hood. But now is fast forward, a lot of those people are now doing mainstream stuff now too themselves,
Yeah. So now, in your opinion, since you saw that, because I do agree with you 100%, how much of it do you think is selling out, and how much of it is, the culture just spilling out into more avenues?
But that's funny you should say that, because what is the definition of sellout, and what's the definition of growth, and what's the definition of economic growth? What you would do with anything of yourself as an individual or as a company branding itself to expand. It's like, if you're going to sell this milk product, is it just going to be for that town and that town only, the residents of that small community? Yep. Or if you branch out and say, something, there's other people that want to enjoy that same milk product in the surrounding towns, and then before you know it, you're regional and maybe a statewide, or someone's going to come and say, no, that milk is only going to be designated for our town and our community only. And if you go outside of that, you're a sellout. Well, what is a sellout? A sellout is someone who's not going to stay, close to their roots and where the milk was developed, or right. You're going to get into economic growth, and that is to expand your product and build your business. And Hammer did that, but then it was frowned upon. But then again, nowadays, most of those people are using mainstream and to branch out and to grow their product.
Yeah, I think it's expected for you to always be, especially like in your neighborhoods when you come from, ghettos and lower impoverished areas. I think people want you to be that same person all the time and never grow. And if you do come back, there's this double-edged sword where if you do come back, you're loved, but then your security is at risk, right? Because with more possessions, more threat. But then if you go the other route and just continue to blossom out into other avenues and other bigger expanses, then those people in your neighborhood are going to call you a sellout.
Yeah. Well, it goes across where it starts at the small level too, where it's, okay, you're going to school, and what do you go to school for? To better yourself. Where you go to better yourself for what? So that you can have maybe a home one day, or maybe you could build your own business one day, and just the basic intellect of intelligence that you want to grow naturally as an individual. You should be able to do that. That's the basic educational principle way. You at least think so, right? So then, then there's a learning difference between one person versus another. So then one may excel or exceed past another person. And if you're able to take that education component and become very successful at it, and you're very versed in it, then you're looked upon as the one that's less versed. It's kind of like, well, oh, you're acting white, because now white people have this reputation of being smart. And then you keep continuing to keep yourself in prison in your mind by saying, well, Black people are continuing to be being known to be stupid. So we're going to stay stupid, and we're going to stay non-educated because of the fact that we're going to stay in this together as a group, but if you exceed past that and go past that, then it's kind of like, well, you're white, you sell out, you're furthering your education. We want you to drown like the rest of us. That's why they always say that, like the crab in the barrel, always pulling the next person down. And it starts as early as that, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is just human tendency thing? And how much of that do you think it's, Black and brown people pulling each other out?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think there's an old saying, you're a product of your environment, so basically is depending upon, and you started out by asking me who I was and what I was about in the very, very beginning. And I was very fortunate that people empowered me when I was a young person. I had a person walk up to me and say, hey, you're interested in going to Penn State, and through a football scholarship or basketball scholarship, and I had a person recruit me to play one of the most prominent basketball teams in the community. And then I performed at one of the most prominent performing arts centers in that community, and so forth and so on. So I was introduced to all this stuff, and that's what I know, and I know what it did for me. And I feel as though that the recipe, ingredients that was ingrained in me, I'm trying to ingrain that in the people here in the city of Worcester, and it's worked, and they've achieved it. And is it for everybody? No. Is it for some? Yeah. It all depends upon how you spoon fed. And some people will taste it and they'll like it, and they'll continue it. And some people will taste it and they might not like it. So no, I'm gonna go a different direction. But everyone's entitled to use whatever they need to use, whether it's information, whether it's direction from your parents, direction from people in the community. Ultimately, you grow and you mature, and ultimately you make your own decision in which direction you want to go. No matter what's being thrown at you.
Absolutely. So you're just opening the doors. You're not actually forcing people to walk through them. That's basically what
Exactly. Not at all. Eventually, you make the decision whether it's kind of like you tell people don't touch the stove because it's hot, and then eventually they go like, you know what I was talking about. You touch the stove, oh yeah, it is hot. So, and it's all about the influences on trying to encourage somebody to do the right thing. And we've all have done the right thing, and we all haven't done the right thing. Let's face it. And I'm not gonna say I'm pure and mighty by any stretch. I've experienced a lot of mistakes. Trust me, a lot of mistakes. I can look back and go, something, I wish I never did that. But then again, I was able to overcome them and able to realize that, okay, that wasn't the thing to do, and rebound, so to speak, and then come back and try to be bigger and better. And then at the same time, try to take somebody with me and try to teach them and tell them that I was once there too as well. And you can either go either way. I always tell the young people, there's two ways in life that you learn your lessons, right? There's two lessons you're going to learn, either the easy way or the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the hard way is the absolute way to go. I found over time that, just like you said, the adversities that you encounter, the thought processes that you have to develop to overcome certain emotions and certain things, just being able to get your ass off the ground when you get knocked down is an incredible trait that, unfortunately, I don't think many people try to chase nowadays, because everything is handed to you now. Literally, they're bringing groceries to your house. So I think that ability to go through the hard stuff, be able to get punched in your face, fall on the ground and get back up. I think that's the one lesson, the one that I give my children, at least. Yeah,
I hear you. And that makes for that person to, like you said, if they're going to handle adversity, and I've been in mental situations, I've been in physical situations, and you're right, man. When you feel that pain being impacted upon you, it's a huge difference than someone saying, hey, don't do this and don't do that. You don't experience it. And then versus going out there and experiencing it. And so once you experience it, you realize that, okay, well, they were right. Or this is the type of pain I don't want to experience again. And
Right.
not to do that, then this is where I'm going to go. This is what I'm going to do. And you're
Right.
right. I think the learning of the lesson the hard way. But the key about the hard way is, and I tell people, personally and professionally, is you have to have that opportunity to rebound, because unfortunately, a lot of our young people don't have an opportunity to rebound, and some of them are not here to speak for themselves today. They're not able to recover.
Yeah, that's absolutely an incredible point that you just hit on. I've actually felt that in my own life and the own stuff that I do, where it's, because of my situation, because of my, my skin, and because of everything, I need to get this perfect the first time, because I don't know how many times I get to try that again.
It's scary,
Yeah. Yeah.
because especially if you have a personal situation where you had a friend that decided to do something or was associated with something,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a chance to recover, and they went out and they learned the hard way, and unfortunately that they're not here today,
Right.
then that's a scar and a lesson for someone like you and myself to learn too, where it's like, well, I don't want to go down that path, and I don't want to experience that person experience, because I want to be here for today. I value life, and I feel as though that life has a lot more for me today. And I was thinking about that this morning too. I'm saying to myself that, as I'm getting up in age and stuff like that, but I just wanted to, provide for my family, do the best what I can do in the community, however I can do that, touch a young person in a manner where that I could share with them and my experience, and hopefully ingrain in them the right way to do things. And I have a number of people coming up to me right now that are enjoying the radio station. And right now it's a unique opportunity to enjoy the radio station, because the establishment or the local media here is shrinking like nobody's business, and
Yeah.
it's not as strong as it was when I first arrived here in Worcester. It's like down to little or nothing. And so
Yeah, let's get into that. Yeah, what's the state of communication? I'm one of my biggest favorite lines. I think it's a Mark Twain line. Is history doesn't repeat itself, but it always rhymes. So you went through all that stuff with the city officials and trying to get everything off the ground. But now you're back in the city. You started a radio station. You kind of seem to have everything that you were working for back then. What's changed since?
What has changed basically is when I arrived here, the communication was you had two newspapers. You had the Telegram, you had the Gazette, you had a strong AM station, you had what we'll call it WTAG, and then you had ORC, I think, at the time too as well, another AM station. And when I played in college, we had a beat writer, they call it, from the Telegram that traveled with us too as well, all over the place. So the coverage was everywhere. They had a designated person for City Hall, designated person for all the sports, all the collegiate athletic sports, all the professional sports, all the local news. Everything was covered. Now, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, when the Telegram got disbanded, they went from the Gazette, so that went down, and then it went from Telegram, and then that got the Telegram's still existing, but the population of it, as far as people and staff, got disbanded, and it's down to little nothing. They just recently let 6 more people go. 3 of them I knew personally, and very, very good writers, and then the publishers even gone too. So now it's like, okay, where are you getting your news from? Where's the voice coming from? Who is sharing what's going on in the community? I had the station, we'll say Worcester Magazine was in partnership with me, right?
Yeah.
And they were like the opposite voice of, we'll say, the Telegram. But guess what? The Telegram had the authority, or were in a position now to buy the Worcester Magazine, and they did, due to the nature of how business ran. So now they got gobbled up. So now you're under auspices of the Telegram. So are they really going to have the autonomous voice and be separate from the Telegram because they were always at opposition? Or now you have to walk in line with the Telegram because now the Telegram owns you.
Wow. When did this happen? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. This happened in 2018.
Okay.
And so now the following year, 2019, they let everybody go. So it's down to a shell of itself. And now it's basically almost like what I was told, almost like an advertising piece, like an insert. It could be for the Telegram. So now it's only one voice. Like where are the other voices?
Right. And I would just take a guess, but I'm going to go on a limb and say this voice is not for the young. It's an older crowd, older views. Is that safe to say, or are they up with the times?
Well, they vote. Don't forget, they vote.
What do you mean they vote?
They vote, and if they vote, then that means they bring that's power. Just
Okay, got you. The political.
Like the old saying, knowledge is power. Well, if people are voting, that older crowd, they move, and when they move, then what happens is they put certain people in office. They put certain people in office, then whatever your needs are, or whatever you stand for, or whatever support you need in the community, then you have a constituent that's going to be what candidate that's in office that's going to support the city, and whatever that case may be. So, but right now, it's a unique opportunity for Unity Radio to pick up those pieces and be the voice for the Black and Brown community, as well as the community at large, because of the fact that the paper is shrinking, and it's well known. It's across the country. It's not just in the Worcester community. It's everywhere.
Yeah. So
where are you going to get your local news from? Where are you going to get that voice from? Where are you going to get that interest in reference to the community? I tell people too that I don't want the community to be turned into, well, when it's time for Thanksgiving, that we're only good for giving out turkeys, or if it's time for Christmas, we're only good for being the recipient and for toys. Right. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, we did our job. And the rest of the year, it's kind of like, okay, business as usual. I think we're more than that every day. And because the Black and Brown people are the ones that keep this community alive all day long, while the city and other different people go out and they build these economic powers around the city or within the city, right. Expecting the community to support it,
Now, for better use of the word, has the resistance been there? Have you been facing the same type of resistance, or is it a lot more liberal, for better use of that word? How does it feel?
I would say I've offered an opportunity to develop a partnership, we'll say, for a number of different media entities. Some have taken it and some have not. And the ones that have taken it, they've taken it for a short period of time. But you know what I found out too, because of the nature of the mission of Unity Radio, it worked initially for the first few years or so because of the fact that the station ran on automatic pilot and I was commuting out of town and coming back in. So I had people who are hosting and producing programs and had radio experience and production experience. And I just opened up the station. I don't have any radio experience except being interviewed as a guest. Yep. But I don't have any radio experience, but I'm learning on the fly. And so it was like, okay, we'll give you content. You give us the station, practically, and saying not like that, but that's basically how it was. And so I said, okay. So the station took up programming from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. on a regular basis. I just came in later on in the afternoon after I got off work and cleaned up and got ready for the next programming the next day. So it ran by itself. But one time it turned where I knew in my heart what the station was about, but the book was showing unity, but the pages were showing a different audience of people that were making up the station. And so it was brought to my attention one time when I started to recruit youth, and the student said to me, I was at a local college, the student says to me, "Oh, Unity Radio, huh?" So I'm showing off the website and stuff. It was just done, and I'm featuring our host for the show, and as well, and they're pretty much well known politically, as white collar in the community. But Unity Radio is supposed to be geared toward youth in an urban audience, we'll call it, inner city. And so the student says to me, he goes, "Oh, wow, Unity Radio, I'm looking at you. This is interesting. I'm looking at your website." And he goes to me, "Why do you got these 3 old white guys on your website?" And this is a white student.
Yeah, it's a valid question.
It was, but I knew that, and I didn't say anything because it wasn't mentioned to me. And at the time, that's what was the makeup. It's like I'm driving the bus, but my audience is coming from from a predominantly white group of people who are making up the programming. Yeah. But the bus is operated by a person of color. But the people riding it were the people of non-color. And so someone walked on the bus and said, "Hey, why is this bus made up of all these white people in here? I thought the mission of the bus was supposed to be about urban and the community." And they were right. And then I went home. I was hurt because I knew it, but what could I do at the time? But luckily, I would say luckily, in time, it changed because that group of people that were on the station eventually found a way to go back to the original location where they were operating prior to involving the station.
Yep.
And then other people's, their personal lives and professional lives changed. So slowly but surely, they started peeling away from the station. And then fortunate enough, I was able to have a producer that came in that just wanted to help. And he came in and wanted to help, and the station changed his life. And he wanted to help, and he helped. And the station got on track to what it's supposed to be today. And I can tell you one thing, Jose.
Yeah.
I can tell you a few things, but I can tell you this in particular. I had all the prestigious positions in the school. We'll say on the station, we'll say superintendents of schools, we'll say senators, congress people, school committee members, city councilors, and the manager and the mayor. Oh, the list goes on. Sounds prestigious and flattering when you're starting a community-based radio station.
Yeah.
But the audience I have right now, grassroots, grounded, true to the heart, to the community people that work hard every day. The station is more popular now by the grassroots people than I had when all those people that were so-called, I wouldn't say so-called, but they are in high positions. There's more of a reaction to the station now than I had when I had all the higher end officials on the station.
I think it's that separation in culture. I mean, it's just one of those things where, somebody who doesn't have, quote unquote, their ear to the ground, right? Which these higher, people don't have because of the nature of their career, but they're just so far detached that when you hear them speak on a radio or any type of platform, and you're, and you're, let's say, urban again, and you're from the urban culture, it sounds tone deaf 99% of the time. I can't relate to any of it.
It's funny you should say that, because it was evident in our numbers. Our numbers showed that, okay, when that group was on with me for a year and a half or so, okay, I call it the establishment, we'll say, lack of a better description. When they were on and they had a number of different people coming through, it's great. Oh, the mayor's coming in. Oh, the city manager's coming in. Oh, the city councilor's coming in. Oh, the school committee members coming in. Oh, the president of this company's coming in. And the list went on and on and on.
Sure.
All prestigious and sounded nice and stuff. And don't forget, I'm starting a grassroots station, and it was flattering. But then, look, hindsight being 2020, I look back and I reflect back, actually, and I look at where it is today and where it was before. It's not even there's no comparison in reference to the numbers and the reaction and the respect we're getting for the station now, when hitting the real people, if you will, in the community. And the people that are appearing on the show, we're featuring businesses. We have a partnership with the Latin American Business Organization. We have sports. We have human interest shows. It's about people. It's about the local businesses and the small businesses. And I tell you, our numbers don't lie, man. Our numbers are up there crazy right now, that people are listening or watching, because we do Facebook Live, than it did when we had the establishment. It's just the way it is, So that's why I'm figuring that, speaking of establishment, the main media that's shrinking in this community, Unity Radio can go but up, hopefully with the support of the people here, and that they want more of this, and that is to highlight people that are really doing something in the community. Yeah,
I think you're onto something. Not only am I super excited to, have you bring that up, but super excited to even be in consideration to even talk to you, to work with you, because I find that with COVID-19 and, the year 2020, I found there was a paradigm shift between the people that didn't think they can do it and the people that now are empowered to feel that they can do it, right? So they want to release this dependency. And they saw in 2020 that the elected officials and the bigger structures that they had in place that they depended on for so long were very fragile, and they were very weak. And when everything started to fall apart around them, you had this huge part of the population that just faded away and just, let it get the best of them. But then you had just as big of a piece of the population that was like, the hell with this. I need to figure this out. So what I mean to say is that I think you're coming in and you're giving them information that actually adds to that fundamental dream, right? Which is, oh, there is a business owner that's just like me. I just heard that person on the radio. Let me get to my business and let me try to do something with myself, because it is possible. And when you listen to these mayors and these other individuals, you can tell, A, that you're going to get a script, and B, I can't relate to you being the mayor because I'm just trying to sell T-shirts.
Right. Well, what's funny, going back to what you said earlier, and to relying on this group, this group, and especially with the person that was in office, that continues to be in office until the new hands change over, the country has experienced, not only locally, but the country at large experienced the type of, well, as I said, I reflect on them as the establishment, the city officials and the government officials and the politicians and so forth. They basically left the people abandoned. It's kind of like this whole curse that's upon the country right now, and the country is like sick, basically, and slowly but surely deteriorating. We're dying right there in front of ourselves, you know. And it's like there's no. It's scary because there's no plan from the top. Nothing. There's no discussion about, hey, how are we going to combat this situation? You know, kind of like several years ago when Obama was in office, when they were trying to figure out the healthcare situation. You know, all you heard was, okay, the knocks on it, the pros, the cons on it. They work really hard to try to figure out how we're going to come up with a plan. But that was the discussion, a plan. Now it's like you're on your own, you know, to defend for yourself. There's no plan from the top. And they think that coming up now, after you drowned, okay, and you're barely surviving it, and you're underwater with bubbles, and all of a sudden now they want to throw you a string to pull you back up, which is my metaphor for a stimulus check. You know,
it's disgusting. Yeah,
like that's supposed to like bring us back up. You know, and I equate that as a string. We'll call it even tooth floss. You know, to bring you back up, to try to see if we can get you to survive.
Yeah.
It's like there's no plan. There's nothing in play. You hear more dominance of, oh, it's spread over here. Oh, it's spread over there. And it's dominating this and that. And all you hear is advisors and people who are saying what to do and what not to do. But then you don't have people on the top implementing safety measures to protect the people. And it's like, you're on your own, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what we're living in right now is you're on your own. You know?
Yeah, I agree. It's like the Wild West is pretty much what it is. But I agree. The problem that I think they have, and what I mean by they, let's just use the word you've been using, the establishment. The problem that they have is that they are so tone deaf that they don't realize that the same people that they think are the victim of the situations are the same people that are comfortable operating in these same situations. So, you know, they may be trying to stifle people down, especially in the minority areas, but we are built to be able to work in these areas. And what's going to happen is we're going to empower each other. And that's where what I'm trying to do with the podcast, what you're trying to do with the radio, this is what they're missing. They're missing that we function well. And this is going to empower more people to basically be more of a threat to them.
Well, what you're just saying is something that's been going through time, and it seems as though they have ignored that and they haven't figured that out, that no matter what you throw at us, you know, that's what we've lived through and how to handle adversity.
Yeah.
And establishment, how they handle adversity is when they get everything and anything they want, they can care less about anybody else, right? But as soon as they get into hard times, they either buy their way out or either B, they use us to buy themselves out or to get themselves out of a situation by throwing carrots in front of us by saying, here, if you help me, then you can get this. Well, I'm saying, well, why couldn't I get that in the first place? Why do I have to be in a situation whereas now that you're stuck and now you're in my situation, now all of a sudden you're going to open up the floodgates and say, okay, now all these opportunities are going to come our way. But then as soon as you get comfortable and get safe again and there's no threat, then you're going to cut those resources off and go back to business as usual. That's the part I don't like, you know?
Right. I think the most commercial example of that recently was the NFL with Jay-Z. It's like you guys got yourself into some shit with the whole Kaepernick situation. You got really deep. All of a sudden, you know, Black Lives Matter comes back, George Floyd situation, and let's go get the big mogul black guy to bail us out of the situation.
Right. And then some people were for him. Then some people said, well, what are you doing? You know? And now it's to the point whereas, speaking of that, back then it was a multitude of people that were, but majority were black that were fighting for the cause. Now there's such a multitude of people that are fighting to support the black cause that businesses are recognized, large businesses recognize that, you know something, it's good business to support black.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Before it was kind of like, it's them versus us, and it wasn't good business to support that because if you supported that entity, you would lose business. Now it's like they realize that the young people have come out and fight in support of the Black culture, they found out that, you know something, this is good business now. So now you've never heard them say in grants or an advertisement on social media, designated resources designed just to help Blacks,
Right.
Come up with a script, come up with a grant, come up with describe whatever, all these different resources to help the people of color now. You've never heard that before,
Yeah, with some of these companies, it works out. With a lot of them, it seems very ingenuous, which actually, in my opinion, taints their image. But another big part of it to me is what's dangerous about that is because they're so heavy on the gun when it comes to looking politically correct and looking great.
Right.
That's when they fall into that cancel culture reality where now you're just empowering random everyday people to cancel everything that you've ever done because you didn't stand up, because you made an advertisement that was for Black people, but your actions in your organization are not for Black people.
Yeah. And it's funny you should say that, because one of the things is they loosely, it's kind of like the word love. People loosely use the word love. Hey, I love you. I love you. I love you. Hey, I love you. So
right.
But, do they genuinely really love you? Is that really heartfelt? Is that really, genuine? Or is it just kind of like, it just feels good in the moment? And it's kind of like the same thing with the establishment. It's kind of like they're throwing it around, whereas they want you to believe that they're about diversity and inclusion. I could tell you one thing. All right. I had a situation where we had an organization that was supporting us, and then the agreement ended. And so, and they went with the people that was actually associated with my organization. Another opportunity opened up for them to go back to their entity, and I'm going to be anonymous here.
Sure.
And so, but then later on, I see that this organization on social media is talking about in inclusion and and diversity and stuff. I'm like, wait a second, you had an agreement with my organization, and if you felt that way, why wasn't the contract A renewed? B, why did you go off and go with the individual that was with our organization and really exercise and promote it that is strengthening your partnership with that particular individual?
Right.
And then 3, just because you have people of color coming in and speaking at your different engagements and stuff like that doesn't mean that you're about diversity and inclusion. And then lastly, if you're going to be about diversity and inclusion, you know what the report card is that I usually use, and I would encourage people, if you hear someone talk about diversity and inclusion, especially a white person, check their roster, like a basketball team. If their roster is made up of non-African Americans or brown people, and the list goes on, and this is talking about diversity and inclusion, then you have to really question yourself, are they about diversity and inclusion? Because there's no way you can sit there and say that you're about that and your roster doesn't reflect it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that roster is individuals you worked with for a long time, so it says a lot more.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
And it can happen across, not only, it can happen across city, government, it can be in nonprofit agencies in the community. And let's talk about that too. I'll put it out there. You got nonprofit agencies in this community that serves a wide, large group of Black and brown youth.
Okay.
All right. How many people can you count that are the leaders of those organizations? You name an organization, you throw it out there, and then after that, go check the books and find out what person of color is leading an agency.
Yeah, I'm sure the numbers are abysmal.
Yeah, because the Worcester Business Journal did a survey, almost in a sense. They did 100 businesses in central Massachusetts of nonprofit agencies and organizations. I think they found out of 100, they must have found 6 people. I think 3 were maybe Asian, maybe 2 with Asian descent, 1 was Chinese descent, and maybe 1 was Spanish, maybe 2 were Black, if that. Everybody else of those agencies, of those popular, well-known agencies that on an everyday basis is ran by non-color, people of non-color.
Yeah, that's
like I said, if you're talking about diversity and inclusion, then I don't see the leadership of that person of the color up there. And is your roster made of that? And is your board made of that? If it's not, then someone needs to be checked, or they need to be checked, on that.
Yeah. Now, as somebody personally, and my listeners who may be from the area and don't know, is there anybody that's pushing for political change that is actually looking out for the minority crowd here in Worcester, or is the ballot pretty much straightforward?
There are people, there are organizations that are doing that. Like Black Families Together is an organization that's doing that. And I'm affiliated with that agent organization, and I know the makeup of the people that are there. And they're trying. It's not an official entity like a nonprofit entity. It's a grassroots entity of individuals with vast different backgrounds, and they have the title Black Families Together, and they meet, monthly or weekly, in a sense, to discuss the subjects that we're talking about.
Yep.
And it can be effective if there's everyone's on the same page, and if everyone goes about carrying out the orders or carrying out the agenda, if there is an agenda, or is it just going to be a discussion panel where it's like, okay, what are you going to do? No, what are you going to do? Oh, what are you going to do? Or what do you think we should do? Or what do you think we should do? Or it's going to be about action, and that's what comes up with these these organizations sometimes. And sometimes, over the years, you got ancestors, and you have the family tree of a number of different individuals that are now talking about it now. But the thing about it is, where's the action? Is there action? And if there is action, where is it? Or is it going to be the same old thing? Talk about the issue. Talk about the issue, but you're not going to do anything about it. Or you don't know how to handle it or go about it. In this instance,
Right. So, and the current state, when it comes to communications, of course, in the current state of Worcester, are you more optimistic than ever, or do you think you're still early in the fight?
I would say that I would be optimistic, but this thing has been going on for a long time. This is ingrained, a long time. But the thing about it is I've seen when people got together, Black and brown people got together and they rallied. I seen it firsthand, experienced it firsthand, that they have the power. And what's funny, in a respectful way, funny in the sense that, what's interesting is young people that are college age created these rallies, more often than adults did,
Yeah.
And so they empowered their classmates, they empowered their friends, their family, their peers. And so I see it can happen. So am I optimistic? Yeah, I'm optimistic, but I'm hopeful too as well. At the same time, those rallies were started by people, young people, that were in the city, that were in Southbridge, that were in Leominster, Fitchburg. Young people started these rallies. So it can happen. But once again, my question is, will this start up when it's political season, which is this year? And we've got to find out what political candidates are going to be running. And will this group be available, meaning the power of these individuals and as the masses, will they show up in November? Will they march to the polls in November? And traditionally, or history has shown, no, they don't. It's kind of like a cycle. I've seen the cycle, where people come and get their 10, 15 minutes of fame, and they march and they say all kind of different things in the media and so forth. And the media writes it because it's sensationalized in a sense. And then when it comes to vote, they're not there. Who do you see at the polls? The same people. Know what people they are? From the West Side. People that are educated, people that have money, and people that know how to rally and get their candidate in there, into the office. And that same person gets voted right back in there again. And then we do the same thing all over again until something happens.
Yeah, it's pretty much free throw practice for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know. And so they say, and I'm pretty sure they sit behind the scenes and say, just sit tight. Yeah, they broke a window or two. Yeah, they're defacing the police cars. Oh, yeah, they're marching on City Hall. Okay, we're going to take the political shame, for now. And they say, you're in office? Okay, you're good. You're in office? Yep, you're good. Your job being threatened? No, not so far. I may be embarrassed or I may be called out, but so far, so good. It's not an election season, so we're good. So let's see what happens during election season. Election season, if the same group comes out, they can make a major change, a huge change, a catastrophic change. But will they do that? History has shown, Jose, no. So we'll see this year. Talk to me in November. All right. Let's see what they did back in last summer in 2020, what they're going to do in the fall, winter of 2021. If they do it, you're going to see change. If they don't, Well, it's business as usual until the
Yeah.
next summer, until it gets nice and warm, until the next March.
Yeah, they definitely they seem to have that card well, where they know that that group is going to run out of fuel eventually, and they have the power, they have the ability to wait it out. Now this year, last year with 2020 with the COVID, it kind of seems even worse because that same younger crowd that you're speaking of that comes out has kind of been neutered. And what I mean by neutered is they've either been kept away from each other because the schools are shut down, or they've kind of been, blamed for everything that's happening. I mean, college kids are getting this, these freaking kids are partying and they're spreading COVID around and they're killing people. So that same crowd that you said comes out not only has been separated from each other, but has been, accused of doing something that they are not doing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
some of them have been arrested, and some of them have been accused of gathering and getting together. But at the same time, the rally this year may be a little bit different than last year's rally. The last year's rally was the gathering. Okay, this was before the virus came out, and so forth and so on. So
Yep.
now, but now, okay, you can still rally. This Zoom. Even a 4-year-old now knows how to use Zoom now. Everybody in the country now is so familiar with Zoom or familiar with virtual right now. We had to have a crash course on virtual. Across the board, everyone does virtual right now.
Sure.
So can you rally and galvanize a group of people virtually effectively? I think you can just as much virtually as you would be able to gather them in person. Can you be just as effective? Yeah. If you find a candidate, right, and then you can sit home here and I can push the button, I can reach 10,000 people. I can reach 500 people. I can reach 1,000 people, due to influences on how you can share and how you can promote and use media. It could be effective. It requires work and strategy, but are we that versed and are we willing to go that extra mile to do that? Like I said, let's check out 2021, November, who marches and who votes, who's willing to come out in the cold and go out and vote. If they do, you're going to see major changes. That's when you're going to see government say, okay, we'll listen now. Because if you know that their butts are going to be voted out and they're going to bring other people in, then they're not at the table and they're taking their job. That takes their income. It takes their reputation. It takes their benefits and everything else that goes with that political position. And also, too, don't let them fool you. If they know that a political candidate is being threatened for their position in city council or school committee or whatever, they rally behind that person and say, okay, yeah, even though you're voting for me, behind closed door, help that person stay in office too. Help that person stay in office too. We have to keep this wall up,
Interesting. It's like a house of cards, pretty much.
You have to keep this wall up and we have to keep this force up. If you really want what you want and you're really going to get those things, that person's not going to give it to you. But if you work with us, we'll give it to you.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll give it to you. And that's threatened to be off the table if you don't vote for me, so look out for us. And what they do, they show up. I see that. I've been at the polls a number of times. I see, and I don't see a lot of people of color at those polls in November, but I see them, a lot of people of color marching in July, in August,
Yeah, I sure hope so, for sure.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Now,
we'll do you'll play this back, and then we'll have another interview again, and then we can reflect back on and take out some of the quotes here.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, they marched this time. We talked about that. We said, are they going to march in November? Are they going to vote? Or do we have political candidates? We don't know. We'll see. It's still early, and we'll see what happens. But then after November, we'll talk about it and say, hey, what happened? We can say, well, they had a political candidate or they didn't. We can say they marched to the poll or they didn't. But history has shown they don't go there.
Yeah, which is a shame and definitely has to be turned around. Now we can speak about other places and how they've handled it, but specifically, let's stick to Worcester. How do you feel the city has handled COVID?
Well, I'm not on the fighting lines, or the firing lines out there to really answer that. But for what I've read and for what I've seen, I find it interesting. One of the things I noticed was in the very beginning, they used to have press announcements, city manager, the health official for the city, and they would update you and the mayor too as well I'm not sure if they're still doing that as of right now, but you hear Boston's doing it, but I don't recall Worcester kind of doing it
Yeah.
anymore as they did in the beginning, giving
I don't.
direction in reference to what's going on and how it's going. All I see or hear is news in reference to the DCU hospital being set up, um, who's getting the vaccine, where to get free testing, and then who's being affected by the virus, and and then all the different warnings that's been presented out there, and then that's all I've heard. But so I guess they're doing something, you know. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure it's led by a leader here in the community. Like I said before, they did have the mayor, the city manager, and the health doctor official of the city would meet. But unfortunately, if you haven't heard, city manager now has it or had it by this time. So it might change the message that he's not up there because now he has it. So it might change the image of, okay, if a person is supposed to be out there talking about prevention, but then they have it themselves, I'm not sure what that looks like, you know.
Yeah, it looks bad. It looks like having a respiratory doctor smell like cigarettes. It's just not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been a little bit weirded out. That's why I always like to ask people how they think, their city or, in our situation, our city's doing, because I see a very different picture from home, and then I see a very different picture. I work at the Belmont Hospital on UMass. I work in the operating room there.
Yes.
So I see a different view from the inside, and the messages seem to conflict. And I won't get too much into the hospital's messages because I don't know who can ever hear this. But it definitely seems like there's a lot of they're sounding a lot of horns that don't need to be sounded. Is the nicest way that I can say that.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think in the very early on, the message was kind of clear across the nation, which is, hey, expect body bags all over the place. Expect this thing to kill 10% of the people, which is a crazy number. But over time, the attempts to try to mimic that message fail because they look stupid every time they continue to try to scare you, if that makes sense.
Well, is it working? Because every time you turn the page, it's always like it's increasing. It's increasing. It's increasing.
But the death, they stopped talking about the deaths randomly. I remember in the beginning, it was like a big focus on this many people are dying, and
the
now
nursing. Right.
Yeah, and now just the number alone in like every state, and now the emphasis is how many people are infected.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So that's different than saying, once again, 10% of the people are going to die. But it's weird because I'm still careful. I still respect other people. I'm never the one that's going to fight the mask thing, whether I think it works or not. It just seems pointless to me to not care for other people. That's all it is. It's just care for other people. But
know what comes to mind, though? Not to interrupt you. Know what comes to mind, though? It's kind of like, if you really can't relax on the warnings and the threats, and sometimes you may have to make it more than what it is, especially whereas if it's increasing and the situation is still continuing to be a threatening situation for families, and they know the waves coming. They have Thanksgiving, then they have Christmas, then you have New Year's, and then they say, okay, we'll see what happens after that. Now we have the vaccine, and it's going to take a cycle for the vaccine to kick in. It's trying to, like anything else. It took a while for the disease to get here and do its thing. So now you're going to take a cycle to stop the curb this whole thing. And so now you can't go out there and say, oh, it's getting better. Oh, we're doing it because you know what's going to happen? People are naturally going to start relaxing. They're not going to start doing the protocol or the measures and stuff like that.
Right.
And then, well, you're not going to get this thing under control for years, So I'm thinking that, well, if it's not what it really seems to be, and if you're in the right spot, then it's kind of like, okay, I could think that way. But knowing people, especially there's a lot of opposition, people don't even think this thing exists and everything else, and people are still gathering and people are still partying and still not taking it serious. I could see if maybe I'm giving them way too much credit, I could see them over exaggerating it to make it so that they can still try to put the fear in them, like stop, slow down, allow us to control this thing. And probably that's why they over exaggerate the situation if that's what the case is, you know.
Yeah, I have and I'll keep them anonymous just to respect their identity. But I have a buddy of mine who's my age, nice and young, goes to the gym every day, great shape. He got his ass kicked and is just getting over it right now. And I'm talking about 2 ER trips, 104 temperature, pretty much all week. So he got his ass kicked. Now I have another buddy, same thing, healthy guy, young guy, whatever, got tested positive, and he's absolutely fine. Right, like it's just one of those things that whatever. So I'm not ignorant enough to say that it doesn't exist and. People shouldn't keep following up with the precautions because I think it's extreme to just say it doesn't exist at all. That's just dumb to say, in my opinion. But I one thing that I'm really scared of right now, in my situation, they're not forcing me to get the vaccine, which is great. That's fantastic because I'm one of the people that actually want to wait and see what's going on. Right. So the hospital forced the flu shot this year, which is something I usually don't get. And the context behind me not getting it is not because I'm anti-vaccine. All my kids are vaccinated, so have I. And also the fact that I take pride in taking care of my body, right? So I work out, I do my vitamin things, I do all that. So I don't feel I need the flu shot. So they enforced the flu shot, and I was worried that they were going to enforce the COVID shot.
Right.
So I was worried about that. Thankfully, they are not doing that yet. But this is the new fear that I have now. What's going to end up happening is that they're going to roll into this slow way of getting you to get it. Oh, it's okay. You don't have to get the shot, but if you want to get on this airplane, you need to get the shot. Oh, it's okay. You don't have to get a shot, but if you want to come into this restaurant, then you're going to need to get a shot. And that's my biggest worry now is that eventually they're going to, I don't know if this is true, but I've already heard that they give you a certificate of clearance. Is what they're calling it, meaning that you're good to go if you were positive and now you're negative.
I was going to say to you, well, would you know if someone is cleared or not cleared? And now you're telling me, and now you're mentioning that, right. that you're going to walk around. It's kind of like walk around with a birth certificate to verify whether you lived in this, whether you were born here or not.
Yeah, exactly. And then not to go down a rabbit hole, but that's the fear is that, you're not going to force people to do anything they don't want to do, right? Because this is America and it'll be unconstitutional. That. But if you continue to shut these businesses down and put these limitations, then you're going to force the business to say, hey, only get people to come in here who have the certificate. And
if that's the case, then people don't necessarily have to, they have options too. People can still order out. And people can still order that groceries can be delivered. People can still order restaurant food could be delivered. Yeah. And so both parties win. I eat and they get the business. I may not be able to go in physically to go inside, but that thing could be delivered home. Okay, fine. I'll have it at home, And then matter of fact, and on top of it, you get the business too. If that's what it's going to come to, the uncertainty of what's going on, it's crazy because slowly but surely America is eroding. Slowly but surely America overall is sick, and so through history this has happened, and it's just I just find it funny because right now I just sit home and I chill with my family and I go out when necessary and come back in, and I teach virtually as well, and but when the movies I'm watching a lot of movies from the past that didn't have it. It just reminds you of like, wow, what life once used to be. You know? You don't see. I haven't seen a movie yet where everyone has masks. Obviously, they haven't shot anything. I can't say that, but maybe they did shoot it. But you don't see a lot of people shooting movies that have people with masks on. It's just like maybe it's not a good look.
No, it's not.
I'm seeing movies right now where it's like, wow, we did that back then. Wow, we were able to walk around like that. We was able to touch people. We was able to go into a restaurant like that. Able to drive a car and go down the street and get out and get it. And it's kind of like that was so far removed, from that. And it's kind of scary where it's all going. So now, as we're trying to get out of this one strand, now they got something coming from the UK or something like that, or from Russia,
I heard. Yeah.
like that already. And then they got another. It's kind of when's this nonsense going to end? If at all.
Right. I think if it's up to just to continue to use the word entities, I think if it's up to the entity, it's never going to stop, man. This is the most power they've had in a long time. And it looks like they're taking full-fledged advantage of it.
Unless there's some plan behind it, with this group that say, okay, we want to minimize and take out this group of population because our population is overpopulated. We want to get it down to a certain number. Oh, okay. It's down to a certain number. Okay. All right. We're ready to turn around.
Right.
Let's start speaking on this. Let's start demonstrating some leadership, and let's start going forward with it. I don't know what the agenda is. I'm pretty sure the answer's out there if you really look it up and go on the internet and find out what the story is. You know, this seems though there's an agenda, because in the past, there was a department that was in position to flag and catch these things, you know, and we lived under it. And we were fortunate that they reported it if something happened in Africa, something happened in China. Oh yeah, this thing came out. It just never reached here.
Yeah.
You know, and at least in this proportion. And and the only threat we had was like the flu this, the flu that, and the flu you, and flu that, the flu me. You know, that was it.
Yeah.
Now they shut the whole department down. And it wasn't because of the money. The money was there. They, you know, the previous president's position, so that this was in place. They had an department special designed to catch these things, so that this wouldn't happen. But this guy comes in and eliminates the whole thing, and then unfortunately this gets through, kind of like lowering the firewall, removing a firewall from a computer, and this virus comes in and it wreaked havoc. And then on top of it, well, I knew that, and on top of it, no plan to diffuse and or to combat the situation nationally. Nothing. Just to stand up there, have press conferences all that. And the press after a while said, you know something? You're not seeing anything. And nothing's going. We're tired of being asked to go to these press conferences where you're just going to be self-fulfilling and what's nonsense. They got tired after a while and it became nothing. Usually when we had a press conference, it was something meaningful. It means that, okay, some news is coming out. But he had it so far frequent and all the time, it was like a soap opera. It was like a joke, you know?
Yeah, like my afternoon talk.
Plan. There's nothing still in place to do anything except just get the vaccine out, roll it out. And the only plan they're saying is, okay, like a totem pole, who gets the priority? Okay, is it the patients? Oh yeah, of this age. Oh, is it the practitioners? Oh yeah. Is it the politicians? Is it the teachers? Is it the nursing people? It's like, that's their only plan in reference to who gets what. But as far as combating it and everything else, collectively as a group, as a nation, you don't hear that. We're still, they can't even get together to try to find out how much money they're going to give back. Oh, we're going to do a stimulus check, $600. Oh, it might go up to $2,000. Oh, it might go back to $600. Oh, it's not enough. It's up and down. It's all over the place, you know?
That's terrible. Yeah, it's just
no leadership.
Yeah, it's bad leadership. You know, like you said earlier here in the Worcester, but in a greater scale, it's just really deep pathways that have been there for a very long time, and they're going to be very hard to dig out and destroy and build new roads because you know, you've had the same faces there for so long, and they have their agendas and they have their connections, they have their peers, they have their promises that they made. I think the disappointing part of that stimulus was not the $600, was just all the money that was in there bloating that's going to go across seas for the stupidest causes, you know, that anybody could ever think of. The funny one was, you know, a certain amount of billions of dollars going to the Gulf Coast to see fish fertilize eggs or some bullshit like that. It was very strange.
Yeah. Well, two is that they're arguing about the fact that, okay, how do you determine who had hardship and who didn't have hardship? Okay.
Yeah.
So if I didn't have hardship and I'm getting a check versus you, we'll say you had hardship and you legitimately had hardship, you're getting a check. So how do you make the distinction between me versus you in reference to our situations? And that's one of the arguments I kind of heard. Well, we're just going to do this blanket. How about, well, you better be concerned on other things too, because there's a lot of times, and still today, stimulus or no stimulus, there's dead people and people's families that are getting checks still, thinking that they're still alive.
Very strange, yeah.
Family members are cashing checks on family members that are no longer with them. You know, so how do you make the distinction between what if you really want to start trying to police this thing? You know, it's like enough. If you're going to do it, at this point, you might as well do it. If you're not going to do it, then I don't know what's going to do, because you know a lot of people are in the hole. You know, in reference to the situation, just give it 2,000 and just call it a day.
Yeah, it's a tricky. They're sloppy. All of them are sloppy. So I'm not even going to give them any credit for doing anything good. I just would say that it's a very tricky situation, especially when it comes to giving, you know, the stimulus out. Is it deserving? Of course. People have suffered since the last one, which is March, and this country is crazy. And if you're sending $500 billion to Iran to do something, you can definitely give people $2,000. The problem that I see with it is, which is one of the rabbit holes that I've been going down lately, is the obvious problem with just making money up out of thin air, right? The inflation problem. The problem that although people are getting $2,000 up front, the long-term way that this fiat system actually works is that the more inflation, the harder it is going to be for the minorities and the poorer people to be able to live going forward. So I know I'm not combating anybody that says that they want their $2,000. We pay taxes, damn it, and we deserve it, and that's fantastic. My thing is that I hope people that are demanding the $2,000 understand that their life can only get more difficult if they continue to print more money.
Right.
Right. I have this story that I bring up usually when Obama was administration. A lot of older folks that I work with would always tell me like, hey, man, by the time you get to the age of Social Security, it's not going to be there. It's not going to exist.
I heard that too, right?
Yeah. So my fear and what I thought they were saying is that the actual, government entity, Social Security, was not going to exist. But they were actually telling me is that if they continue to print this money like it's nothing, your money that you put there is going to be valueless. It's going to be like a pile of sand, and you're not going to be able to do anything with it.
Well, the other story is too, sometimes going back to what you said a little earlier, you kind of touched on it a little bit, whereas I don't know, maybe there's some method out there or some theory out there. They're trying to eliminate races, certain groups. And once again, another situation involving race, whereas now this has to involve race, whereas the unfortunate, the disenfranchised, and the list goes on, that who gets the vaccine and or who is getting the support in the hospitals,
Yeah.
And then that goes into the health disparities. We've already had health disparities with people of color. It's already documented, and people black and brown like that.
Absolutely.
So now you get something like this. Does that increase those health disparities? And also who gets taken care of? And so the person who doesn't have what we talked about earlier, those cachet people that they know and support, do they go by the wayside versus a person that voted and has the cachet and knows the establishment that's ingrained in the establishment? They seem to get they're gonna get taken care of versus someone who doesn't vote, who doesn't have that that opportunity,
Right.
It's always across the party lines in reference to haves and have-nots, and it's a shame, and it's too bad that everything comes down to that, the haves versus the have-nots.
It's a very strange world there. Now, I mean, you're older than me. Is there a certain time in your lifetime that you can relate what's going on to, or is this uncharted territory? We've never seen this.
It's kind of like uncharted, but then again, the measles earlier, when, I was born in the 60s, so the measles, or the mumps, at the time was an issue. Contagious. I think I caught that one time too, it was contagious like that. But since then, through history, you talk about it. Since then, there's a lot of diseases that have come out. But like I said, there were catch bases in place. There were resources in place to catch these things before they came over here. Now what happened was, the analogy I used earlier is kind of like a firewall in your computer that, you turned off the firewall. So now this virus came in, and it came into the country, and they knew it. And not only did they know it, I would think that, okay, I made a mistake. It's here, but we're going to do something about it. But you dismantled the whole thing in reference to, because it was under somebody else's name that they did that. So you disbanded the whole organization.
Very weird.
So what? Anything that had Obama's name on it, was like, we're going to take that. We're going to tear that apart. Healthcare, take it apart. Even though they said that, even though healthcare, even though it says Obama's name, it was actually created by the Republicans. It's just that they just put his name on it.
Right.
So it wasn't a Democratic thing. It was a Republican thing. But since his name is on it, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to eliminate this thing too as well. But I'm going to promise you, according to that person, I'm going to promise you that we're going to have something else in this place. All right. So you're trying to prove that this doesn't work. You're trying to prove that it's no good. But yet at the same time, you're claiming that you're going to have an alternative for it, and you don't have an alternative for it. This is how crazy it is.
It's insane.
Take something away, and you don't have no better plan. Leave it in place till you able to create something better. But you haven't not only have you not created something better, you haven't created anything at all.
Right. I'm sure the majority can see that that's ego at hand. Ego playing its best card there.
Sure. It's crazy. But in the world, history has shown we've all been through all kind of crazy different things. It's just sad that we're living it now, and hopefully, knock on wood, we can live through it. unfortunately, a lot of people haven't been able to do that, and bless them and
Right.
rest in peace. But at the same time, I don't know what the future holds because there's no leadership. So the only way you can determine leadership and to see what happens is you have to wait till after the 20th because they're still fighting, determining whether Biden won or not. They're still fighting that thing, still trying to take it to court, still spending money left and right to try to prove that he didn't win. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, and trying to build a coup in the process. I mean, I don't really get into all that stuff. I do lightly, like politics and stuff, but it's very obvious that when you're trying to build a coup, this is exactly what you do to rile up the troops. It's the only thing that I can see.
Yeah, he's doing it behind the scenes now because now he doesn't want his hands on it. He doesn't want his face on it. So he's setting everybody else to be the focus.
Yeah.
Like McConnell is set to be the focus. So now all of a sudden he didn't sign that first, meaning the guy that's in the office. But then later on, he signs it, and it's kind of he finally signed it. But now all of a sudden, he signed it. What does that really mean? Well, now it's switched over to the other House representatives, and so now the attention is on them. So the attention is now off of him.
Yeah.
So, but don't know behind the scenes that he said, "Okay, I'll sign it." But we all know that even though the president signed it, he still has to go past the House of Representatives. But you guys say no.
Yeah, you would think the most, the area of business that needs to be the most professional and organized is that scene right there, and it's probably the most unorganized anywhere. It's insane.
Yeah, it costs people lives,
Absolutely,
costs people lives, and it's unfortunate. So the only thing you have to really measure anything of some type of pinlight of hope is you got to see what happens after the 20th. Once you get rid of this other guy, get him out, and then allow this other person to come in with his team and then come up with a strategic plan. They say he's just as worse, if not worse, but at least I would say to a certain degree, it seems as though that he has some I wouldn't say wholesomeness. I'd say at least he has some there's a word that's used out there, some humanity.
Yeah, right. Less ego for sure.
Humanity.
Yeah,
because I know they're trying to go after his son because of all the crazy stuff. I don't really care if his son's out there doing whatever. I'm not saying I'm condoning it. His son's doing whatever with another country and they're giving him all this money because he's on the board of this and board of that. There's nothing any different than what's happening over here, But as far as what's going on, as far as the country-wise and what we're going through, at least maybe he might show some humanity and get this thing under control, but we won't know till after the 20th of January,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in the near term, the popular opinion out there, I agree with. I don't know if he's going to make it in the near term. I mean, the guy looks like he's definitely not aged well, and
right.
he definitely looks like he's falling apart. So I don't know, Ernie. I'm younger. I've never seen anything like this. This is uncharted territory for me. I don't even have anything to relate it to be honest.
Right. Only thing I do, man, is I pray every day. You find someone, you get under something that's a good Bible praying church or something of that nature. If you're religion at all, you take care of your family the best of your ability. And you just try to be safe as best of your ability, and you try to find something to distract so that you're not focused entirely on this whole thing,
Yeah.
It's kind of like stuff you see in the movies where everyone's just bunkered into the house and can't go outside, and it's like all you see is tumbleweeds blowing down the street, like
yeah,
that.
right.
A city that was once hustling and bustling, now it's just like a ghost town, because everyone's inside because of the fact that, the ghost out there is killing people, So now it's like, well, and then who knows, you kind of get an idea, but what about the poor kids that disrupted their lives at an early age,
Oh yeah, I have a 10-year-old that I think about.
They're going through,
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old that I think about hourly. I mean, minute by minute, I think about, wow, what this girl has lost. I also have an 8-year-old and I have a few teenagers, but the 10-year-old is the one that strikes me as, oh my gosh, like this is where she's supposed to be hanging out with her buddies, her friends, playing on the playground, learning, how to incorporate with other people. And she's stuck at home with us adults and a screen. And I worry about her a lot for sure.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
so think about it, you have to minister to her and then try to encourage the other group to stay solid, like that too. So, and you have to kind of like balance it a little bit, because sometimes the person that's that's really struggling, you give them a lot of time. You give them a lot of time, but the person that isn't kind of giving the signs of struggle, they are feeling the effects, but just that they're able to be a little stronger. But you don't fall asleep on that person either as well, because it's, it's shown that if you give all the attention to one person, it could be adverse effects to somebody else too, because they can look at it as like, well, you're giving that person all the attention, and I need attention too. They all need attention, but at various degrees, so.
Yeah, they all need attention, and they're always paying attention, which is something that me and my wife has tried very hard to just stay strong during this situation, especially my wife. She's one of the ones that have to transition from teacher now to daytime worker to all these things. But I always try to remind her that they're watching. Just try not to break, at least not in front of them. Try not to break.
Exactly.
Try not to break. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
but that's
something that hopefully sneaking in. It's like, get a meal in that makes you happy. Watch a game that makes you happy. Watch a movie that's going to make you happy. You got to do a checkpoint with everybody after every few hours. Let's do something that we really like. Okay, let's all watch a movie together. Let's have some fun. Okay, let's have something. You got to be creative. At least something out of each day to keep everything checked until finally, maybe after something starts to show signs of, things are getting better. Yeah, definitely. A lot of work. Mentally and physically, but. In the end, you have no choice about the matter. It has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. We only control what we have control of. Ernie, I could do this forever, and hopefully this ain't the last time we're going to speak. I don't think it will be. Please let the listeners know where they can listen to the radio station, where they can get any information that's helpful to them.
Oh, sure. Our station, if it's I call it on the outside, which is over the airwaves, is 97.9 FM. And in the inside, I say that, and we're streaming at www.wuty979fm.org. In other words, .org. And you can go there. We have a number of grassroots programs that's there, and our team is growing, and we're starting to get between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We cover the talk circuit after 6 p.m. or so. We try to do music between 6 p.m. to like 6 a.m. And we're starting to increase our different genres on the music. And then and we're talking as early as today on how to try to be more of a vehicle to support the people in the community through either sports or through news or human interest stories and entertainment. So we're looking to recruit people that are interested in getting on the team. We want to build a huge team and to create this vehicle and to be an effort to create something for our own, and this is Unity Radio, that, and the slogan is stated as Worcester's Community Connection, Unity Radio, Worcester's Community Connection. So
I love it. I'll definitely put all the links inside of the description for the audience to get to. Ernie, I appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate everything that you've done and stood for. Look forward to, talking to you and partnering you up, seeing if I could help the cause in any way, shape, or form. And most importantly, thank you for the most important thing that we have in this world, and that's your time, for giving me and coming on the show and talking to me. I appreciate it.
No, and thank you. And likewise, it goes both ways, and I'm looking forward to you joining us, and we're looking for others to join the team. I've already got, as I said earlier, the rocks and tomatoes thrown at me. I already cleared the path. So we have a station. It's official, and we're looking for more soldiers to come on board and fight the fight, And not just that, but come up with some ideas and stuff that we need to put on the station to create the information that's necessary to get out to the people. I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn. And I created the station, so I welcome everybody and anyone who has some production experience or has some ideas that they think the station can flourish in order to serve the people of Worcester. I'm on board.
Love it. Knowledge is power. All right, Ernie, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, you too. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Another great conversation in the books. I hope you guys really get what I get out of people that are able to do selfless things and help others instead of, prioritizing themselves. I appreciate that, and I learned a lot from that. As always, guys, please rate, share, and subscribe this episode. It's the only way I can continue to have the conversations I love to have, and you can continue to get the conversations that you love to listen to. Until next time, stay safe. Later.